Before we jump into today's interview, I want to tell you about today's sponsor, High Beam Marketing. If you're a founder wearing every hat, then this ad's for you. You got a great product, the reviews are solid, and you even got people reordering from you. But for some reason, the growth you're expecting to happen is happening way slower than you need it to be. You tried running ads yourself online and it's mixed results. You tried hiring a cheap freelancer from Fiverr or Upwork and it was kind of meh. And then you take a big swing, you hire a fancy agency, and then all of a sudden you spend all this money just to get outsourced overseas or have somebody fresh out of college take over your account. And that just doesn't feel right. And that's usually where High Beam Marketing meets entrepreneurs just like you. We run your brand through a 200-point audit and show you exactly what's working and what's not. And suddenly you got clarity for the first time in your life. You got a plan and you got a partner who actually gives a damn about you and your business. And your job is just to focus on what you do best. And High Beam's job is to run profitable ads that scale your revenue. If you're tired of ad agencies giving you the runaround and you want to see if High Beam is the team that actually is different, book a discovery call today at highbeammarketing.com. Now let's get in today's episode. What's going on, everybody? Welcome into the Highlight, a business podcast for business people. And today I've got a great friend on the show, a former Air Force guy just like myself. And it's really cool because I don't get to meet a lot of Air Force guys anymore in my business. And I've talked a lot about on my social media channels lately, the DAV Patriot Bootcamp. And this is where I met my guest today, Dan Manning. He's a storytelling legend. This guy can spin a yarn. And, pilots, he used to be a pilot. They're good at that. My brother's a pilot. He's great at telling me stories all the time. So this guy knows his stuff. And he's the founder of Build the Story, where he helps brands craft narratives that actually move people to action. And his work is rooted in the idea that storytelling isn't just a marketing tactic. It's a 100,000-year-old technology, which I found super fascinating. And basically, it's this way that humans have transferred ideas from one another forever. And Dan believes that in a world of flooded information, it's the stories that stick and not necessarily the facts. And that brings me to say the first question today, Dan, if storytelling is this really ancient technology for moving ideas from one person's brain to another, why is it still so powerful in such a tech-heavy world where we think new things are so vogue and so cool?
Yeah, I mean, it's so powerful because it works. It works because our brains are wired to receive information through story, right? If you've been doing it for 100,000 years, if humans have been telling stories for 100,000 years, our brains don't change that quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that people learn best is through story, right? You tell me about some challenge that you've had, something you struggled with, how you solved it, that comes with context. It's easy for me to take on board. It's still around because it is the thing that moves ideas, and humans are designed to receive stories.
In your long career, is there like one story or like what was the first story that really stuck with you where you kind of looked at it maybe from 30,000 feet up after the fact and said, wow, I can really see how powerful storytelling can be now?
So, I mean, probably it was probably in school, right? In high school or junior high. And if I think about the teachers that were most effective for me, the teachers whose classes I wanted to be in, the teachers that I didn't mind listening to, the teachers who also were able to communicate their ideas and teach me the things that I needed to learn, they were also the best storytellers. They were people who there was actually one was I wasn't in his journalism class, I was in his history class, but he could tell amazing stories about history and make these old things come alive to somebody who's in junior high. And that's junior high students, that's a tough audience. And if you can communicate something from the history book and make them want to learn it, that's true power. And that applies not only in the classroom but in business and in any place where you're communicating with humans. Is just stories work.
Yeah, why is it? Well, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself here because I just came back from a conference out in California. It was an expo where it's essentially a food conference where they're trying to get wholesale distribution into major grocery players. And you go look at all these booths and they all say feature, 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 feature. And I didn't feel like a lot of them were telling a story versus the best booth I saw was from the famous brand Liquid Death now, where they had a coffin and it had a flipped open casket that said "Murder Your Thirst." And there was nothing about the features of the product. It was all about the story they were trying to tell. So, I mean, I guess let's start there. Like, what are the key ingredients of a story? Because that booth story is a story. And like, how do we actually put those key ingredients together to actually make a story that'll drive sales? Because at the end of the day, we are business owners and we are trying to influence people, right?
Yeah. So there's two there's two ways I think to think about story, and it's important that we make sure that we draw this distinction between the two because both are incredibly valuable and both are helpful and useful and will drive sales and get people on board and whatever it is that you need to do. But one of them, and the place where I focus primarily, is on actual storytelling. That is a story that has a character. This character has some goal. There's something standing in the way of that character achieving their goal, and then something changes. Either they change themselves or they change the world, and now they're able to continue on and do the thing that they were trying to do the whole time.
Mm.
In business and advertising, a customer success story is a fantastic example of this, where I worked with a client. They came to me because they were struggling with this. They tried this other thing. They tried this other thing. It was frustrating them. They couldn't find a way to solve it. And then I showed them the way. I did this for them. We took them through my program, whatever this thing is. And now all those challenges they had, they don't have those anymore. And now they're able to be more successful. That's an incredibly powerful way to get the story of your brand, of your business, of the value that you provide into the mind of someone without triggering their resistance to hearing advertising.
Mm.
Those are the stories I primarily write. But then you also have these broader stories, like the Liquid Death story, the having the coffin and murder your thirst. Liquid Death chose to position themselves as something very, very different from all the other water brands. They tried to pick something that was so far outside of what you would expect for water that you noticed. So now people begin attaching their own story to that brand. So if I want to be like everybody else, I can go buy some Aquafina or Dasani or whatever at the place. But if I think that I'm a little bit more of a rebel, I've got something extra, I'm a little bit outside of the norm, well, I'm going to be drinking Liquid Death. And now people are bringing their story, they're connecting it to this brand story. And it's this sort of a joining of identities that is working not because we're actively telling a story, but because of the stories that are playing in our brains.
Mm. Well, something you brought in there was problem, and that's something we talk about as marketers a lot. Is like, we try to identify who's your ideal customer, and so let's start there. Like, is it important before you put any story together to understand who your actual customer is?
100%. Absolutely. So when I meet with a client, our first discussion is always going to be about the customer. And even in the little discussion you and I had before we hit record, I was asking about your customer and about the audience because I want to tune my message to fit my audience.
Mm.
I care more about my message than any audience does. So I want to do the work myself to make myself easy to be understood. And the better that I understand my audience, the more likely I am to communicate in the way that they can receive and I can actually be heard. The most important thing, I believe, in business for me to understand about my audience isn't like all the typical demographics and stuff if we're making an avatar or things that we're going through. The one thing that gets me 80% of the way there is understanding their pain, not the problem, but the pain. And I have a whole thing where I talk about the difference between pain and problem, why it's so important to talk about pain, and we can go there if you would like. But when I can understand what the pain is that I can relieve for customers, I am much more likely to be able to communicate to them in a way that I'm heard.
Yeah, I do want to go there because there's this. It's easy for us to go feature first. Like everybody at that conference I was just talking about, like protein's the big thing. We just, put 20 grams of protein in it and all of a sudden we're a differentiated product. Our story is just so incredible, isn't it? But if everybody's doing it, all of a sudden it's no longer a story, right? So that's like the very minimum level is like, what's your unique feature? And then I always thought problem was great because that took you down below the surface and most people don't ever actually get there. So it's like, it's pretty easy to just talk about problem, but you take it to another level with pain. And so why is pain more powerful than a problem when it comes to storytelling?
So first, let me make sure that I'm clear about the distinction between problem and pain. So I think it was actually last year. I was traveling. I was in DC and I was teaching for a week-long thing, and I started feeling this toothache. And I don't have a dentist in DC. I live down north of Birmingham, Alabama, not too far from where you are. So I was like, I'll finish up what I'm doing here. When I go home, I'll go to the dentist. So I come home, I get an appointment. It's a few days later. By the time I go to the dentist, like my jaw is hurting. It is interfering with my sleep. It's interfering with my work. It is significant pain going on there. So I go to the dentist. She takes some x-rays. She comes back and says, you're going to need a root canal. What we're going to do is we're going to send you to this other place, that incredibly sore part of your mouth. They're going to inject needles into, then they're going to drill into that tooth. They're going to rip the root out. They're going to shove something else in there, and you're going to pay us $1,000 to do it. I
What a
said,
privilege.
can I do it today? Like, can I go? Right? We're not having a debate about, where did this come from? What's the real problem that's going on inside there? What's this real thing that's happening? How can I prevent this in the future? I don't care about any of that. What I care about is relieving my pain. The problem is the thing that needs to be solved, but pain is why we want to solve it. I've got lots of problems right now. My office is a little bit of a mess. I've got a car that needs some work, but we have two other cars. So that car being broken doesn't cause me any pain, and I'm not doing anything to try to fix that car right now. But I'll tell you, in a couple hours, I'm going to be hungry. I'm going to feel the pain of hunger, and I'm going to go and take action and find food and relieve that pain.
Mm.
People pay to relieve pain, not to fix problems. And when we can understand that, we can communicate better to people initially at that level of pain. Sometimes when we're working with people, they don't know that they have the problem that I solve. But I've never had to explain to someone what their pain is. So if I start with pain, they're like, this sounds like something for me. And now I can get them to listen to me long enough to describe their pain in enough detail that he gets it. And now I say, well, that pain, and the customers I'd worked with, it comes from this problem. Here is how I solved that problem. And I've earned the right to talk about my solution because I started out connecting with their pain.
That's good. That's really good. So what are the questions you ask to uncover your customers' actual pain points? Are you just reading reviews, or do you have an actual like specific system you follow to mine that data?
So typically my clients are the founders, right? They're the business owners who are trying to address, their customers. So I'll ask them, I give them sort of this description, this division between pain and problem. Sometimes I'll ask them, how would somebody know that they have the problem that you solve? What are the symptoms of that problem? What would they be seeing in their business at the time that they actually have that problem? Well, they might say, if somebody's a lead generation company, they'll say, well, the problem that we solve is they're not getting enough leads. Like, all right, there's tons of people that say they're not getting enough leads. What does it feel like to not have enough leads? Well, it's frustrating. All right, well, why is it frustrating? Well, because you can't sell anything unless you have people that you can talk to. Well, aren't they going and talking to people? Yeah, but they're not the right people. Oh, so they do have some leads, but they're not the right leads. What does it feel like to be talking to somebody who absolutely isn't the right person? It feels like a waste of time. All right, so they feel frustrated. They feel like they're wasting time. They feel like maybe they're spending money on these leads that aren't the right ones. So now they're wasting their money on these leads. If we start out by talking about these things and we tell a story about somebody who had exactly those same pains, and now they came to you for the solution, we're going to be able to bring in those people into our story in a way that we can be heard and understood.
I like that. I want to make sure. I guess my mind's getting a little jumbled up, and it could be because it's the end of the day, and maybe I need to do this in the morning with coffee. But and I think maybe the listeners too, because it's so easy to be benefit focused, which is understandable. But I think problem is a little bit easier to separate from benefits. And so you said the problem is the what, the pain is the why. And so in that example that you just gave there, like what would be the problem being the what? And then are you playing like almost the old school 5 whys game to like really drill down to the core, or?
No, so it's a little bit different. So
Okay.
I say that the problem is the thing that needs to be fixed. The pain is why I actually want to fix it. Why am I willing to spend time, to spend money, to spend effort to actually fix that thing? Lots of people have problems that they don't spend any time, any money, or any attention to focus. So like, all right, that's good enough for right now. That's not causing me any pain. Sure, it could be a little bit better. But these other things over here, these things hurt. These things are causing me pain. That's where I'm going to focus. If you were selling solutions to a problem, that's fine. If you're selling solutions to problems that are painful, right? If people are actively looking, they know what their problem is. They know that there are some solutions out there. They've already decided, I want to do something to solve this problem. Great. Then that's all they need. But for most of the people in the world, they're not like that. They feel this pain. Sometimes they don't even know that pain could be relieved. They don't even know that somebody's making the thing out there that might be able to relieve their pain. Or they feel this pain and they say, well, that's probably because of this problem. And they end up spending money or they solve the wrong problem because they haven't really identified what that problem is. So problem is the thing that needs to be fixed. Pain is why we want to fix it. So in the example of the lead generation agency, somebody who's doing that would say, well, our problem is, or the problem that we solve is companies not having enough leads or not having the right leads. Now the pain is, why do your customers finally decide that it's time to fix this? Because people, since the beginning of whenever people started selling things, they didn't have enough leads and they didn't have the right leads. Why did this person decide, or why would they decide, this is enough? It's time for me to do something different. And when we can get close to that, we can tell a story that's more compelling and is just going to ring more true and loudly in the mind of the people we're speaking to.
So we want to tell a compelling story there. I love that line.
Yeah.
How do we tell a compelling story?
So,
which is the $1 million question, I think.
Yeah. So I do have a structure that we go through that's very much a very straightforward structure with those pieces. But even before you start thinking about the structure, I try to think about, what is my audience already interested in? Rather than trying to make them interested in the thing that I want to say, I want to find out, what are they already interested in? And now I'm going to connect my message to that thing. Essentially, when I start talking, I want my audience, or I want to say to my audience, I won't say it directly like you're interested in that thing, but I might say, when I speak to people like you, business owners, people who are leading, marketing agencies, they tell me that they struggle with a few things. I was talking to a guy just the other day, and he said, da 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 da. Like, here's the pain that he's experiencing. When I nail that pain, and you were the person that has that pain, that story shifts from being about this other guy to being about you. You start imagining yourself talking to the wrong person, spending your time with people who are never going to buy your thing. Maybe you're even buying a list of leads or sending out cold emails. You're hearing nothing back from those emails. And it's frustrating as a business owner. You had these big dreams about how your business is going to be, and now it's not like that at all. You're disappointed. So if I explained that this other person who came to me, they were disappointed, they were frustrated, they were wasting money, wasting time, and they had set a clock for themselves. They said, if this doesn't turn around in the next 6 months, I'm going to have to go get a real job. If those things are true for you, you're like, oh, wait, that sounds a lot like me. And now if I stopped telling you the story, you would be upset, because now you want to know, well, what happened to that guy? Because that guy sounds a lot like me. Whatever worked for him might work for me. And now you're begging to hear, what is that solution? And we've opened the door to, now we can talk about benefits. We can talk about features. We can talk about other things, because you're already in. The hardest problem is getting people in the first place.
Well, I know in my world, we talk about hooks a lot, but I know you think that's a little bit of a bad word, and you have a different word for that. So I'd love to hear your version of hook and why you don't like the term hook.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not the word police. People can use whatever words they want to use, but the word that I use is a fuse. I don't like hook because I don't want to trick anyone into listening to me. Like, the metaphor of a hook is you put a piece of bait on a hook, you throw it in, and now you're going to trick a fish into thinking that it's something that they really want. They bite onto it, and now I pull them out of I've got, some ponds on my land. I pull them out of the pond, and they're in a place where they can't breathe and they don't want to be. That's not how I want to treat my client, right? The people who I want to serve, I don't want to trick them into listening to me. So instead, I try to think about a fuse. So my client, their attention is short and intense. It's like a match. It burns hot and it burns fast. And I believe the content that I produce, I believe what I provide for people is powerful, right? It's the fireworks in this analogy. And what connects that fireworks to that match is a fuse. You don't just go and stick a match onto the fireworks. You need it to light that fuse and burn in so it's able to actually do that explosion. So instead of a hook, I use this idea of a fuse. If I can get them to put their attention on this fuse, now it's going to burn in. We're going to make this connection, and now good things are going to happen to them. It's just a mindset shift that I prefer, and it drives me to think about what am I saying that makes them eager to spend their attention on this thing.
Mhm. Well, man, I like that analogy, and it's kind of challenging some of my pre-held beliefs here. So I don't know if I'm ready to change yet, but I'll give it some thought, and you and I can have a coffee at the next Patriot Boot Camp and
I'd love
really
to.
unpack it just one-on-one there. But like, so with the fuse thing, how do you build fuses that stop the scroll? Because
Yeah.
so much of our storytelling today happens on social media, and you've seen it, people just burning through the feed. How are we doing the fuse in a way where it stops the scroll and it's not just aggressively hooking them out of the feed and treating our customers the way we don't want to treat
Yeah.
them?
So like everything that I say is connected, right? It should all come together. The social media that I'm personally most active on and where most of my clients are is on LinkedIn. So it's already they're in a mindset of sort of a business focused thing when people are on LinkedIn. But when I teach fuse building for LinkedIn, I say that an effective fuse, what I found from my own content, what I see in my clients and other people that I teach, has three important components. The first is that it includes I, me, or my statements. That is, you are signaling that this is a story. Everybody who is on LinkedIn needs to buy things, but nobody wants to be sold to. People like learning, but nobody wants to be lectured to. So if I can signal that this isn't some blanket piece of knowledge that you can get maybe in the next post or somewhere else, this is something that is from me, from my personal experience, people are more likely to read it. The second is that I want the people that I'm talking to know that I'm talking to them. Sometimes that's as clear as just calling them out in those first two lines of that LinkedIn post. So I might say, I worked with a founder who, and I'm going to tell you the third part here in a second. But if they're a startup founder, we're going to talk about founders. If I'm writing a post about executives, I'll say executives. I'm talking about business owners, I'll say that. Sometimes it can be a little bit more subtle depending on the audience that you're trying to reach. But I want the people that I'm writing for, that market that I'm targeting, as they're scrolling through, what I want them to say at every step of the way is, oh, this is for me. So I've used I, me, or my statements. I've called them out in it. But the third and the most important is to talk about the pain. It is to talk about what is the pain that they are feeling. People all the time say that our attention spans are getting shorter. But the same people that say that go and binge an entire season of their favorite show on Netflix, and they'll gladly give up hours and hours of their attention to that show. I say that it is not that our attention spans are shorter. It's that we have a lower tolerance for things that are not interesting to us.
Mm.
But I'm telling you, Chandler, nothing is more interesting to us than ourselves and the pain that we feel. So I did a post just today saying I worked with a founder whose pitch I worked with a founder who was tired of hearing no. I showed her how to start hearing yes. Right. So here's this little pain about hearing no. If you're a founder, you were tired of hearing no, and I showed her how to hear more yeses.
Mm.
It's probably worth you clicking the see more to see what's on there. And now that fuse has brought you in, you can consume the content. But now I've got to deliver. It can't just be a clickbait type thing. I've got to show some real value there so that you are willing to do that again the next time, and maybe the next time, and eventually check out my profile. And now you connect with me, and we're having a discussion if I can help you to relieve that pain.
That's funny. It's a whole fool me once situation there. It's like, yeah, I can get you to click maybe once or twice, but the third time is going to be incredibly difficult if I don't deliver on the promise of the first two lines. So when you said that founder had the issue with the pain was that they were being told no. Would that be the problem though? Like, should your fuse have the problem in it? Like, why would that be problem or pain? I think I really want to hone in here, and the reason why is I think it was David Ogilvy that famously said, "If you've written your headline, you've spent 80% of your budget." And I think that's why people don't spend enough time thinking about how they start these fuses and to actually capture the attention from other people.
Dude, the fuse is everything, especially on LinkedIn, right? Because nobody has ever scrolled to the end of LinkedIn. Nobody's ever gotten to that last post and like, all right, that's it. There's nothing else.
Some days I've tried, Dan. Let me tell you,
my thumb's worn out. So because there's always something else. There's always something else that I can spend my attention on. So I want to, if I don't get someone to click see more, I think LinkedIn's shortened it down to just more. But if I don't get someone to click more, it doesn't matter what else I've said because they're never going to see it. It is everything. Like I can have, yeah, I mean, at that point, it is everything. It's literally all that they see are those two lines. So they see my profile picture, maybe a little bit of my stuff there. But if they don't click see more, it doesn't matter if I've got the best content in the history of marketing or in business, because they're never going to see it. I've got to spend my time on that place. But you asked,
Yeah.
why would I not call out the problem? Because this particular founder, like she thought that she was doing everything right. Like she's a super smart woman with an amazing nonprofit, is what she happens to be doing, and she believed that she was giving a pitch that would give her a yes, but she had pitched 50 times and heard 48 no's. And she wasn't asking for a massive amount of money. She had great proof. She'd already helped 7,000 kids in her nonprofit. She's got a PhD. She has an amazing program, but her audience wasn't understanding it. So if I had talked in my content with her about many founders fail to start out their pitch well, and because they fail to start out their pitch, they end up hearing a no. Now I'm counting on her to say, maybe I'm not starting out my pitch as well. Maybe that happens to be the problem that I have, and she has to do all this extra work. Meanwhile, like, it's on LinkedIn. I want to get 2 lines to do it, and she's already scrolled before it ever gets there. But if I talk about pain is something that is intense for all of us. And I've got to make sure that I'm talking about the right pain. Now, when I'm talking about where you hurt and I'm offering that I have some solution to the pain that you're feeling, you are much more likely to click see more and find out what's actually there behind that solution.
So you got me fused. The fuse is lit. Now, how do we get to the fireworks? What's the rest of that story structure that you have, that you walk people through?
Absolutely. So once we have the fuse, and I will say the fuse is absolutely the hardest part to write, and typically I'll write that last after I've sort of have the whole story and I know exactly what's going on. But now when we get to the center, it's simple. It is before. What do we need to understand about this character just to give us enough context to know what's going on? So typically I will give some type of time reference to let people know whether it was last week, last year, 10 years ago, or something I'm telling that I heard from 50 years ago or something. But I'll say, like for her story, I would say, in fact, I've already said most of it, right? Is that she was a startup founder who had a PhD, and she had a nonprofit that was delivering great results already. She had 7,000 kids come through her program with life-changing results. That's the before. But there's a problem. And now we get to the challenges section. But there's a problem. When she would go to her corporate partners, she went to her corporate partners 50 times and she heard 48 no's. She was invited there to be able to pitch because they thought that they saw promise, but something was happening. She wasn't connecting with the audience that she was pitching to. So she was walking away disappointed, and she wasn't able to support the kids that she knew that she could help. So she came to me asking for help. Now we're in the challenges part, and we're starting to move to the change. The change is the center of every story. Every story is a story of change. Every story. If you don't have change, you don't have a story. Change is what your audience is waiting for. They're waiting to see, all right, it'd be horrible if I said, it was great talking to you. It sucks for her. Let's keep moving. Right? You want to find out. It is. Like, it's bad. Somebody ought to do something. Right? But now I say, so she asked me for help. I asked her to pitch me exactly as if I were her audience. And when she did, I saw that she was making 3 mistakes in the first minute that sank her pitch. I showed her how to fix them. Mm. And now you're like, all right, so what were those mistakes? In hers, right? Her opening had a very complicated scenario that I couldn't follow. She never was very clear in that first minute about what her business was. And then she asked me some direct questions that sort of took me out of the story and put me in this analytical mindset rather than in my story mind that we had there. And it just disrupted the way that she was communicating with people. So I said, well, what if you did it like this? And I gave her back a 1-minute pitch that she could open, or a 1-minute story that she could open her pitch with. She loved it. But more importantly, so now I've talked about the change, and now we're going into what I call the resolution. How did those challenges go away? But more importantly, she emailed me this week and said that she used that pitch for the first time in a group of 40 people every one of them were paying attention. Every one of them understood what she was
Mm,
talking about, and they made appointments with her to follow up.
yeah.
That's the resolution. The after is, and now she has something that she can deliver with confidence that's more likely to connect with people. The final part is the meaning, because we're in real life. I'm going to tell you exactly what I was talking about. She was letting simple mistakes in the opening 60 seconds of her pitch turn yeses into nos. When you can fix those, now you have the opportunity to hang on to that yes and do the mission that you've built your nonprofit or your startup to do.
Mm, I love that. So there's another question I want to ask about structure, but I feel like we're at a natural point here. I wanted to ask you about the CTA as well. Like, how do you, like, because there is a little bit of an implied CTA at the end of that story, and I think that you might say that because it's such an emotionally engaging piece of content that you almost are compelled to do something and find out more. Like, do you make it a simple, clear CTA, or is it another story? Like, how do you get people to go take the next action you actually want them to go do?
So typically I will separate the CTA from the story, right? But I build the story in a way that that CTA is implied, just like you are feeling. So if I'm working with a client, I'll ask them, another one of my sort of introductory questions is, what do you want someone to do at the end of this story? Do you want them to go to your website to sign up for a mailing list? Are you in a situation where you're directly selling with a customer and you want them to say, yes, here's my money? For her, these the corporate partners that she was pitching to, they were going to receive her pitch, ask a few questions, and then within just 2 or 3 days they would make their funding decision. So
Mm,
she wants them to remember her, so that when they're making that funding decision in 2 or 3 days, she's made that impact there. So I build the story that leads to that conclusion, so that the person I'm speaking to, so that the audience I'm speaking to, it is it's just clear to them that, well, I need to find out more about Dan. I need to find out what's going on there. Or if I'm selling an actual product, now I'll talk more about that product. I'll even talk about probably the pricing and how that works inside of the story while they're in this story mode. While they're
mm,
not like resistant, they don't have their shields up, they're not afraid that they're being sold to. I can sneak in all those messages in a way that is easy for them to receive. Again, I'm not trying to trick them or manipulate them. I'm trying to help them to make a decision. And if I'm
mm,
talking to the right person about the right pain, it's going to be easy for them to say yes.
mm,
So the actual CTA is probably going to come after. I'll stop the story. People are going to say something back to me. And it's important for me to listen to what they're saying. Are they asking a question? And what type of question are they asking? Are they now, or do they start sharing their own story? You know what? That sounds a lot like me. I struggled with those same things. I heard a lot of no's, and that is super frustrating. And now we're in a conversation. Oh, so what did you try to do? What is this? What is that? And now I can deliver that CTA later, after I know that this is something that can actually help this person. They're in, and we can get to that place.
mm. That's really good. I like that. So, is there a place in that story structure that you just laid out there to include benefits? Like, should we weave
Oh,
those
sure.
into our storytelling elements? And if so, like, how do we weave that into the storytelling elements?
Yeah. So I'm weaving it in after I already have their attention and, more importantly, their interest.
Gotcha.
So if I start talking about benefits and features up front and they're not interested in the thing I'm talking about, it's wasted breath. Because like I don't care that you have the fastest version of this thing. I don't even think I need that thing.
Mm,
But now if I can bring them in, and I bring them in by talking about their pain, I talk about, often it's a customer success story about somebody else who's had this thing. Sometimes it's a founder who has built a business around a problem that they solve for themselves, and we can tell their story um, instead, maybe there. But now when we get to we talk about the challenges. Here's the change that I delivered for them, and that's where I can start talking about benefits. So even in that short story I told about the founder, in about a minute, I gave her back, like, here's how you might want to open your pitch. And it was that 1 minute was something that was very, quick and powerful for her. So one of the benefits is, if you get on a call with me, you're going to get some very instant advice that converts into solving, relieving that pain and solving that problem right away. Or
mm,
I might talk about, um, instead of having to spend thousands of dollars to solve this and wait weeks for some type of solution, I was able to give her something that day for less than it cost her for one trip to go travel to pitch these corporate partners. She was
mm,
saving money instead of wasting it. So I can build those in as I'm talking about the change and kind of talking about the resolution, but my audience's mind is already open to receive it at that point, because one of the things stories do is they cause us to suspend judgment. We wait until the end of the story to evaluate, like, does it make sense? Does it apply to me? Like, those things that they were talking about in that story, like, how do those fit together? And it's that suspension of judgment that is so critical when you're selling anything, because people make decisions often very fast, but they don't understand what it is we're talking about yet. I want to be able to hold your judgment long enough so that you understand what I'm saying. If you say no, you say no, but at least you're saying no to the thing I'm proposing, not the thing that you imagined I was proposing.
Yeah. The suspension of judgment. I've never heard that phrased like that, but that is exactly what's happening there. And I really like that. I think it was Charity Water's founder, Scott something that talked about when he was first trying to raise money for Charity Water, he'd go into these pitch rooms and he would lay out all the facts, aka features of, here's how many people need water in the world. Here's what could happen if you got people water. Here's how many people are dying from lack of water, yada, yada, yada. And he was really struggling to get any sort of traction with fundraising then. And then I think accidentally he was just in a room one day and just got hit with this very simple singular story, and just told the story of this little girl that got access to clean water and what that did for her, very similar to your structure you laid out here. And then all of a sudden it was the best fundraising day he'd ever had. And then he just repeated that over and over and over again. And they're one of the most popular charities in the world. So like, is it, when you're saying that we're suspending judgment, or when I give you a bunch of facts, is the human brain just immediately going like, I think that's BS? Like, I think all your facts you're giving me are BS, like prove it. And versus like when you're telling me a story, I'm just like, I'm going along for the ride. And like, I'm just more naturally toned to do that. Like, how do you?
Yeah, so there's a couple things. So it's not that the facts are BS. It is that when I'm delivering facts, and you see startup founders are on, wherever you talk to people who are in business, they will often start out with delivering facts. And so you give me fact number one. And what I do with fact number one, same thing that most people do, I'm going to apply at least a little bit of critical thinking to that fact. One, do I think it's relevant to me? Two, if it is relevant, do I think it's true? And if it is true, what might that mean? But you didn't stop talking. You gave me fact number two, fact number three, fact number four. I'm still evaluating fact number one or fact number two. And now I've missed those other ones that you think that you've communicated to me because they fell out of your mouth, but they never got into my brain.
Mm.
When I communicate a story, though, because we suspend judgment in stories, we have to assume, for the sake of the story, that what someone is telling us is true. That's how we can watch, Star Wars or movies about time travel or these other things. We'll say, all right, in this story, here's some different rules that will apply. And then at the end, I can say, well, could that actually ever happen? But for the time that I'm telling the story, you're receiving it as if it is true. But more importantly, you're imagining it. You don't imagine facts. It is hard to imagine, I don't know what the right number is, it is hard to imagine that 300 million people every day don't have access to clean water. Like, it's hard for me to imagine what 300 million people means. That seems like a lot of people, but there's billions of people in the world. So I don't know, is that really a big problem? And see, meanwhile, you've kept talking, and I'm still thinking about that number. But if you say, here's Jane, and she's living in this small village in Niger, and she has to walk 2 miles to be able to get a cup of water, and that cup of water has bacteria in it, and it's not clean. We are delivering water so that she doesn't have to miss school to go get a drink. We're bringing water to her so that she gets this most basic element of human nutrition in human life, and she's able to do all these other things that people should be able to do. And we can make the difference for just this amount of money.
You know what's funny is you caught me flat-footed there, because as soon as you said 300 million, my brain immediately went to like, that's like every person in America not having access. And then I was just thinking, even in the middle of this conversation, and I'm the interviewer, I'm the host, I'm supposed to be paying attention. My brain went off on this, like, how big is that number? That's like, there's 8 billion people. I'm doing math in my head. Like, it's crazy. And I didn't come back until you started telling the next story that I was like, all of a sudden, like, oh, wait, I got to get back in it. I do like, I think it was Steve Jobs that did a really good job with this, where he would always introduce products with a very like agitating of the story on the front end. I remember when he The famous ad for the iPod when it first came out was a
Hmm.
thousand songs in your
Yeah.
pocket. And they agitated that problem on the front end of that, saying like, Walkmans suck, like getting music onto Walkmans suck, like it all
Hmm.
sucks, da 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 da. And then
Hmm.
here's this little thing that was just in my pocket the whole time, and it's a thousand songs in your pocket, and boom, it's good to go. And I think even when he said a thousand songs in your pocket at the end of that, it wasn't a distracting thing. It was more of a like, that's going to solve all my problems. Like that's the perfect time to
Yes.
introduce that fact.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he didn't talk about, oh, we have this FireWire connection. We have this new Toshiba micro drive. We designed this front as a combination from HAL and this clock radio thing or whatever that the designer did, because nobody cares about that.
Yeah.
Nobody cares. I mean, eventually they will care, but when it's something that's new, or when you're talking to strangers, all strangers care about is themselves and the pain
Mm.
that they feel.
Yeah, we talk about it all the time, and it's something I shared during the Patriot Boot Camp. And if you're a
Hmm.
veteran, I highly recommend you click the link in this video or podcast, wherever you're watching this, and check it out if it's not too late. But we talk about like the biggest competitor you have is not the person that's doing exactly what you're doing down the street. It's not even what somebody's doing in another city or down the biggest competitor you have is the fact that your brain makes 35,000 decisions a day, and you're aware of 70 of them. And so you're
Hmm.
basically competing to be one of the 70 decisions that somebody makes consciously. And what you're talking about here with this storytelling stuff, from the fuse to the structure to even breaking out the CTA and like when to incorporate the features, like that is essentially turning your customers off of autopilot and getting them to pay attention to you and what you're doing in that moment, so that you can hopefully influence them to do something that's good for them. Now, I think we both would agree that you can't be a bad person and use what
No.
is it, it's the Uncle Ben saying, with great power comes great responsibility. So
Hmm.
don't be a piece of garbage when you use these things, but truly go out and serve people. And like, this can really change your business, this stuff you're talking about.
So just the fact that, and I say it as well, but just the fact that you have to say, don't use these for evil is evidence that they work. Right? If they didn't work, there would be no reason to say that, right? If I had some magic crystals, you're like, oh, don't go use those crystals for evil, and you have no belief that they're actually going to do anything, it doesn't matter. You don't have to give me that warning,
That's
right?
exactly right. Yeah. I'm not worried about your crystal or astrology sessions that you're doing in your basement. That doesn't
Right.
really bother me. But I am worried if you get on the internet and spread a bunch of misinformation, which, that may or may not be happening right now in America. Welcome to our
Sure.
life. So when you're
Yeah.
talking to customers at different life cycle or different stages of the buyer journey, I should say, like some
Hmm.
are completely unaware of who you are. We'd put them in a cold audience. Some might be sort of aware and they're in a warm audience. Some are hot and they're like, it's kind of the scenario you already explained earlier, where
Hmm.
it's like she's in the room pitching. Do you change the type of story you want to tell or the type of pain point, or is it's sort of ubiquitous and it doesn't matter? Pain is universal and it's going to resonate for any stage.
So I will still start with the pain, because I don't know, like I don't know for a fact exactly where all the people in the room are. And there may be people who are in the room who are influential, but maybe they got brought in
Mm.
to this discussion in a different way. Pain helps me to sort of level everyone. Pain and also the story, because now I have the story that I can refer back to. We've all experienced this story, and I know you experienced it because I just told you what the story was. So I'll still start with pain, but the pains are going to be different. Pains are different for different audiences. Even if we go back to the Liquid Death and at this exhibition, if you think about who were the type of people at this expo that you attended, were they, obviously there's some marketers and there's merchandisers and there's corporations, I imagine, that are buying these products to put into their stores. I don't know much about the expo. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So those people don't have the pain of necessarily like their identity and connecting it to Liquid Death, and they don't have the pain of thirst that they are trying to solve. They have the pain of, how do I put products into my store that my customers want,
Mm.
right? And or that's really the problem. The pain is that they're bringing in products into their stores that they think are great products, but maybe their customers don't want them.
Mm.
Or maybe their pain is that they're losing market share in their local market because customers are going across town to this other place to buy these other things, and they want to bring that back to them. And all the better advertising, these other things that they've tried haven't worked. I don't know that audience well enough to speak directly to their pain, but I want to make sure that I'm speaking to the pain that this audience has. So I will change the story to fit this audience. Let me give you one more example. So for instance, lots of people, startup founders, build two-sided marketplaces. Well, in this two-sided marketplace, you have two different customer segments that have two different pains. You've got the pain of people who have some great product, but they can't find a way to sell it. And then you have these other people who have a pain that they're looking for great products, but they can't find them. And I will tell two different stories to those two different segments, because if I get those stories the other way, the buyers don't care that sellers are struggling, and the sellers don't necessarily care too much that buyers can't find the right thing. You've got to tell
Mm.
the right story to the right segment for it to work.
I'd love to know how you determine when is the right time to tell a story, because the example that just popped in my mind for some reason when you said that was the infamous Pepsi ad a couple years ago with Kylie Jenner, where she's sort of like breaking through the line of protesters. There's thousands of
Mm-hmm.
protesters everywhere, a lot of turmoil, and here comes Kylie Jenner walking out of the building. You can't really see what's in her head, and you can't really see what she's doing. She breaks through this line of protesters, and she approaches this really tough-looking police officer in riot gear,
Mm-hmm.
and you're like, oh, I wonder what's about to happen. And she hands the dude a Pepsi. And like, this was one of the worst reviewed ads in the last decade, and really hurt Pepsi's consumer sentiment. They spent a ton of money on this ad, and it got pulled so fast. I mean, it hurt their brand. And so
Mm-hmm.
storytelling is a two-edged sword, right? It can do a lot to build your brand and move your business forward, and it can also take it down a notch or two. So like, how do you know that you're telling the right story and that you're not misaligned on pain points or something like that? Like, is there any guardrail there, or is it just bad luck?
Well, so first, like the first question you asked was like, when do you tell a story? And for the clients that I work with, I lead with the story. I want the story to be the first thing
Mm.
that customers are encountering, because of exactly what you said, that we make, I think you said 35,000 decisions a day, and we're only aware of 70 of them. People, if I delay telling the story, people may have already made up their mind. And it is so much harder to change someone's mind than it is to help them make it up right the first time. So, in fact, even like you gave me a great introduction to this podcast, and I appreciate that. When I speak at events or I speak on stage, I often tell the people introducing me, like, give me the absolute minimum introduction that you can give me, because anything else that you say about me, people are already starting to make up their mind about the type of person I am. Oh, he's in the
Mhm.
Air Force. Well, I know people in the Air Force, and now they start applying these other stories. Oh, he was a fighter pilot. He's probably going to be
Mm.
this cocky SOB that's going to be up there. They're already starting to make up their mind. And now when I take the stage, I'm not speaking to a blank slate. I'm speaking to a group of people who have already made up their mind about me or about the product that I'm selling. When I
Mm.
give a story, I suspend that judgment long enough for me to give you everything that you need to be able to come to what I believe is a more correct assessment of me.
Mm.
The second question you asked, though, was how do I know if a story is working? So, in most of the work that I do, we have we have a direct interaction with our clients. We're not doing like a major international campaign, and even then, you'd probably do a focus group and you would talk to people then. But the clearest way to understand if your story is working is to listen to the questions people ask you at the end,
Mm.
because people will ask one of two types of questions if they have any interest in what you're talking about. If they don't have any interest, they're not going to ask any questions like, I'm glad you stopped talking and we'll move on. But if they are genuinely trying to listen to you and trying to understand what's going on, they'll ask one of two types of questions. The first type of question is a clarifying question. They will ask you something that you believe you already covered. If they ask you a clarifying question and you think that you already said that, well, that's your problem. You
Mm.
did not deliver in a way that gets your idea into their brain. Those are ones that I need to go back and I've got to fix the story because something wasn't working.
Mm.
The second type of question is the one that I want. This is an expanding question. That is, oh, I hear that you do this thing. Could you also do that for them? Or could you
Mm.
also serve this market? Or could you also do this thing? Great. Now they believe that they understand what it is that I'm doing, and they are looking to find other ways to apply that story. Those are the questions I want, and that's a clear sign that they get it.
Man, that's so good. I'm just immediately flashing back to previous sales calls I've had with people where I've gotten clarifying questions before and been like, "Man, I just said it. Do you not
Yeah.
understand?" And then I've
No.
had better days, and I've had the expansion questions, which I like a lot. It's a lot more fun and easy to answer those questions because generally it's like, "Yeah, we could probably figure that out." So I love that. Well, Dan, I appreciate you so much for coming on the show today. We always end the show because you've been so gracious with your time for the last hour with us. I'd love to hear like, what is your big ask, man? How can we support you in what you're trying to do?
No, so I mean, really support me on LinkedIn. I publish content there several times a week that's all about story and storytelling and building a business. And I have a slightly different view than most people in the marketing profession because I didn't grow up doing marketing or thinking in that way. So I would love to meet more people there.
Absolutely. I've been following you for a few months now, especially after we got to connect at the last DAV Patriot Boot Camp. And he's one of my favorite LinkedIn follows. I got the little bell or whatever it is on LinkedIn turned on, so I get dinged every time Dan posts something because his stuff's can't miss. And the storytelling stuff, it is. I had this person in sales one time tell me that everybody is in sales, and I extrapolate that out here to mean that everybody is in storytelling. Sales is just storytelling. It's just you're getting information before you figure out what stories to go tell, and if you want to make your life a better experience, I would say be better at telling stories, because then all of a sudden you can do what we talked about at the very beginning of this episode, and you can transfer the ideas you're trying to share from your brain to everybody around you's brain, which then will get everybody on the same page. And I think everybody would be happier. Well, Dan, thank you so much for joining me, man. This is one of my favorite interviews of the year. I appreciate it. I look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks, my friend. And we appreciate everybody out there listening. We will see you next week.